the human experience is the center of the entire treatment. The feeling to get my life back, to be fully myself, to be in my body without the constant panic voice can come up. Like I started singing.
Welcome, Myriam Barthes, to the New Healthcare podcast. It's a really big pleasure. We were planning this for quite a while. And you are the CEO of Journey Clinical and the co-founder of Journey Clinical. And I would like to start with the current, let's say, energy, especially in America. Since the executive order on April 18th, we kind of feel that psychedelics are moving forward very fast. Where is Journey Clinical in all of this?
Yes, of course. This is such a great question. And thank you for having me on your podcast. We've known each other for so long.
Mm-hmm.
And we did a podcast, I think,
5 years ago.
5 years ago.
On Zoom.
On Zoom during COVID. Yeah. And here we are back.
Mm-hmm.
And the psychedelic landscape has changed so much. When we look back, we had a psychedelic renaissance in 2020, 2021, and then followed by a psychedelic winter after MDMA rejection. And now after the executive order, psychedelics are having a comeback. And I think what is really exciting, and it's palpable, is that people can't wait. And at Journey Clinical, we have been building the infrastructure for both clinicians as well as patients to have access to these medicines as soon as they become FDA approved. So Journey Clinical is America's gateway to psychedelics. What we have done is we have built a platform for both clinicians and patients to access psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy. And so what this means is we're open in 30 states. We've already done over 1 million hours of ketamine-assisted psychotherapy, and we're ready for psilocybin as it becomes FDA approved. We have insurance coverage. We're in network with most payers, and we have already about 3,000 psychotherapists that are on our platform. What we see in terms of outcome is that 87% of patients report improvement in clinical outcomes, and that 40% have full remission.
Wow, it's impressive. So, and you guys started with ketamine as a kind of compound, let's say, helping people to look into their kind of mental health issues. And so over the weekend, in a very safe container, I did a ketamine journey with a lozenge. And I found it specifically interesting how deep one can go into their own subconsciousness. I mean, now you could say, well, you can do that with all kinds of psychedelics. But I found this really interesting moment, but I found it really interesting how a good therapist can lead you in a very efficient and equally soft way to help you to enter your own consciousness with that. So how important is the therapist as a person, and that you also know who these people are, how they work? I mean, it must be a very special relationship, right?
Yes, of course. The therapist at Journey Clinical, our ethos has been that we want people to access psychedelic therapy, and we believe that the therapist is the best person to be with the patient. And we follow this preparation, dosing, integration protocol. So the way it works is that before you even have an experience, you prepare with your therapist, you set your intention, you set the intentions of being present with what comes up. And sometimes dosing experience can be beautiful and blissful, and sometimes it can be a little bit scary. And so the therapist is that person, the container that creates safety for the client. And then that alliance, we call it the therapeutic alliance, continues throughout the treatment. So it's not only preparation, but it's also the dosing session as well as integration. So after having a dosing experience like you just had, content comes up, emotional material
Mm-hmm.
comes to the surface, insights, and you're like, oh, what is this? And so then the therapist is the container with whom you're going to continue to unpack these experiences. And as we know, this is not linear. Sometimes you feel worse before you feel better. And sometimes you need to make sense out of these experiences. Imagery is like not always obvious to interpret. So we have seen that container being the container that really allows for emotional, relational change.
And do you feel at one point in the future, or maybe in the near future, those kind of treatments, let's say, of course, in a container that is supervised, because I think it's more and more, I think this is important. Will this become something that we should add into our normal medical, I don't know, history? Like you go to the eye doctor, you go to the skin doctor. I do actually. So
We all need a
do,
dermatologist.
do you go? Yeah. Well, also yeah.
And beyond.
You go to the, let's say, twice a year or like once a year to undergo a journey, because I really think it has such an impact also on your life path, in the sense that it's not like erratic, hopefully, like in the sense like, oh, you wake up and then I'm going to change everything. But I think it has such a strong element of almost like being your companion in a way, these treatments, to really guide you in, let's say, the right direction eventually for you. So do you look at this like that in terms of the company? Would it be a company that is at one point part of one person's personal journey, and it will eventually turn into a consumer brand, so to say?
Yes. So we always say
Yeah.
Journey Clinical
Good.
is America's gateway to psychedelics. And I think one thing that is important that you brought up is that mental health is a continuum. And you might have experiences in life where you feel really depressed, and then you have a psychedelic assisted psychotherapy treatment and you feel better, and then you stop. And then you might experience a loss in your life, and then psychedelics might make sense at this moment. So I think it's, just like any other medications that exist here in America and beyond, in Europe too, where, like physical health, you go to your PCP once a year to check up. Why would mental health be any different than physical health? I think there's a little bit more stigma around mental health, and it's a little bit harder for people to talk about it. But what we want to make sure is that psychedelics, when appropriate and for the right people, can really help.
I mean, you were just mentioning it in terms of America and Europe. So, I mean, you are also from Europe, and you have this European perspective, so to say. Like, how do you think this needs to be introduced in Europe? I mean, there are already steps that are being taken, but we all know it's kind of a very difficult situation in terms of EU, like the allowance or the kind of legal situation is much more difficult, apparently. So, but in terms of like a maybe also strategy or energy, how do you think psychedelics should be introduced in a European context? Is there anything that comes to mind for you?
That's a big question.
What is your impression? What is your, if somebody would ask you, you have a country, I mean, you from Switzerland, France. So let's say in your context, if people would say, well, help us to introduce this,
Yeah.
where you basically come from.
It's interesting as you say this, because I'm trying to compare the U.S. and Europe. And in the U.S. you have it's a really big country that has a lot of states, and you have federal pathways like with the FDA. That's, for example, ketamine, or Comp 360 if and when approved in 2026 or 2027. And so when you get a drug through FDA, you have national approval. And I think Europe is a little bit different because you have so many different regulatory contexts.
Mm-hmm.
Each country has a different regulation. The second is the cultural context. In America, there is kind of a common culture, but still you see differences between like California,
Mm-hmm.
Texas,
Mm-hmm.
and New York. And I think in Europe, each country has a different culture. So, for example, Switzerland might be a little bit more open because of the history
Mm-hmm.
that it has with psychedelics. We've seen maybe the UK being a little bit more open too, and then other countries might be a little bit less open. So I think you're navigating different regulatory contexts, different cultural contexts, and then you and I were talking before, Americans get excited. Like something is working, let's go. We
Yeah.
go and we do it. And I think Europeans are a little bit more maybe skeptical
Mm-hmm.
and also a little bit more resistant to change or
Yeah,
not as
absolutely.
rapid to adopt new modalities. And so I think you really need to bring a balanced dialogue and talk about the nuances, talk about name the molecule, explain how those are different, talk about the medical risks and benefits, and educate people. And I think education is the way, both in America and in Europe, to help people understand what this is.
But how do you? I think that's kind of the big thing, how to educate people on this. So some people say what needs to be like super science based. People just need to know scientific facts, so to say. And some people really strongly believe this is the most important thing and it's the only thing that's necessary. Other people say like, no, 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 it needs to be communicated through personal stories because otherwise people cannot adapt to it. So, and sometimes even as in the podcast, I find myself kind of between these kind of elements who don't really seem to meet each other very often. So what is your experience? When do people really say like, oh my God, this now makes total sense to me?
You know, it's fascinating because I think there is for sure an experiential component to it when you have either experienced your life evolve with psychedelic therapy or when you have witnessed somebody close to you that you love change through these experiences, it becomes very simple. Now, in order to get to that, there is so much educational work, as you said, to be done. And I think this is a field that, to me, it's fascinating. There's so many tensions, right? There is like, we need to get the medication to market as quickly as possible because there are millions of people suffering. So that's on one side. On the other side, you hear those molecules need to be researched more. And both are true. We need to continue research and we need people to have access. I think psychedelics bring such an interesting mix of tensions and contradictions that holding them and naming them is, at least for me, the way that I reconcile all of this.
Yeah, and I think it's like this. It's also like your job, so to say, as a company, to constantly put these things together to make it really understandable. But I want to quickly come back to your personal story because you got into this field of psychedelics because you had a very bad accident, and that basically helped you to overcome maybe also the trauma you had experienced there. So maybe you could talk to this a little bit.
Yes, of course. So, as you know, I had a pretty serious car accident. This was in 2012, so a while back.
A while ago.
And, you know, after the car accident, really the first thing that I did was focus on my physical health and trying to regain range of motion and to walk and to be able to carry objects. So basics. First, it was all the basics. And then I kept on noticing that, you know, I would go to the restaurant and if somebody was eating and the noise, I would feel really panicked. So I would feel these waves of panic in moments that nothing really is happening. And I think the metal sounds were really triggering to me.
Like if somebody would cut something or like a piece of food,
Like cutlery.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. Okay.
Like
Interesting.
metal would, right? Because in a car accident, you have a lot of metal crush.
Yeah.
And so, and of course, probably somatic pain in the stomach. And, I had seen so many doctors. I'm in New York. I have access
You
to
were in New York.
I was in
already.
New York.
Okay.
That's right. So I saw many doctors, were like, we don't really know what you have. And so then really out of like last resort, I tried psychedelics, and it was so clear. My first experience, I almost had a map of what needed to be released and kind of some instructions to come back 6 times, and I did. And after 6 sessions, it all went away, and it never came back, right? We're in 2026. Like, it never came back. And so it was such the feeling to get my life back, to be fully myself, to be in my body without the constant panic that the trauma from the car accident can cause.
And when was the moment where you started to understand, okay, this, let's say PTSD with hearing these noises, kind of, which is, I think, related to post-traumatic stress, like, and I think it's in general, like certain noises like are connected to this, what that aggravate you. Like, when was the moment you realized this is gone?
Such a good question. I don't
Or
know.
like it became, you didn't think about it anymore?
No, I
like,
didn't. I think
yeah.
it's more like, oh, I could just go about the day and not feel panicked. I wasn't tracking anything. I was vague. And so it's simply like, oh, I had less stomach pain. Oh, I felt a little bit more energized. And I think this is like such an important thing. Like, it's not such a linear journey. Like, you feel a little bit better, then you feel a little bit worse, right? It's the small things. I always said, like, it's in the ordinary. The change happens in the ordinary. There's no, sometimes there is, but very infrequently, like a big breakthrough.
Yeah.
So it's the small little things where you feel better in this situation and better in that situation. And then you're like, wow, I had a great day.
Interesting. So, but of course, you did also some kind of, physical exercise or yoga around it. But I think that the biggest thing is that those things start to fall away, kind of. And I mean, I remember like at a certain time after journeys, I had also a phase with this noises could, like people talking too loud or something. It was very significant, and I never really recognized it before. But it peaked and then it just went away. So it's almost like it has to leave your body, kind of, in that sense, that annoying or that irritation or something.
Yeah, it feels more of a letting go or releasing and I think it's important for people to understand in general that it's, we associate psychedelics often with breakthrough. And I think it's not always helpful. While it can be true at times, it is more helpful to realize that change, first of all, change happens through you. The psychedelics, they are amplifiers. They amplify you. And what is helpful is to remember that you have agency. Remember that you have the resources to feel better, and trust in yourself so much that even when it's hard, it's going to be okay. And so you walk through these moments and it gets a little bit easier and a little bit easier and a little bit easier.
This is a very good kind of transition to one of my favorite topics around you. So you're now the CEO of a company. And as we all know, this requires really, it requires different, or it presents different challenges to you than, let's say, if you just in the context of a company or working for a company. And first of all, I'd like to know, what is your idea of you as a CEO? What is the thing that you would like to create with this company also? What is your personal vision?
For Journey Clinical?
Yeah, but you being the CEO of this company, because you can say those are the goals of the company. We want to, at one point, we want a 10x scale takeover. But there's also the question of you being the CEO, kind of what kind of CEO would you like to be, so to say?
Yeah, and maybe I can answer that in
Of course.
two
Yeah,
parts.
of course. Yeah, sure.
So I think there is, the vision for Journey Clinical, and I think that really remains true to its core original vision around creating the infrastructure for clinicians and patients to have access to all psychedelic therapies, starting with ketamine, but psilocybin, MDMA, DMT, like all of the psychedelics that have FDA approval. So I think there is the company vision, and that remains core and true. Now there is each person with the way that they are and the way that they lead and the way that they show up does this slightly differently. So I think what I've learned, and I will say, it is so psychedelic to
Okay.
to build a company. Just like psychedelics, the company is a mirror. It shows you what goes on with you, and it's very amplified because your decision impacts hundreds and thousands of people. And so I think there is like a real responsibility to me that comes with that. And then also an authenticity. Like I have to do this by being true and authentic to who I am. And so does everybody else. Anyone who's in that role has really to be authentic to who they are, while of course there's some business realities, and you don't change those. You have to work within those realities. So what I try to do to the best of my ability is, one, hold all of these different, sometimes in opposition realities, and try to be as centered as I can so that I can make the most helpful decisions for the company. It's not always easy when you're moving at 100 miles an hour. You have decisions that come through your desk that need really rapid answers. You often have limited information, especially in the field of psychedelics, where everything is always changing.
Yeah, true.
So I think being centered, being clear around what's my own authority has been a journey.
Maybe we talked about it quickly earlier. Like, one part of your authority is this pure, like, no makeup, not having hair done, like just kind of, you described it that way. So I think your hair looks great. But I mean, so this is interesting because we kind of like learn in all these kind of, let's say, creator contents that once a woman gets into a position like that, you need to look into, okay, how does my skin look? How does my hair look? Like, do I wear eventually the right designers? Will I be part of another group of powerful women? I mean, if you look at, let's say, on Instagram, on the picture, or you see the pictures of powerful women, it's kind of somewhat kind of one look. They all have, of course, they look not all the same, but it's kind of a playbook, so to say. So, but you don't seem to be interested in that, and I find it really interesting that you also don't use it as a, oh, I don't care about this. It's just something that is authentic for you. So maybe you could talk to this, because I couldn't do that, for example.
I think there's two things. One, there is, and I've learned and I continue to learn. This is important. I've really learned that power doesn't come from without. There's no power is a being in your power happens within, and it means connected to reality as much as you possibly can. And then everything else that happens in the outside world is kind of inevitable. Like things
Yeah.
will happen. If you're clear, if you're in your power, unapologetically, which for women we have, like, as you said, like a playbook of an external playbook of what this
Yes.
looks
Yeah.
like.
Yeah.
But I wonder, could it look different for each one of us? Right? Like, could one person be wearing stilettos and leather and
I
another
mean,
one?
let's put these together. Like,
No, but let's, like, I think I'm taking extremes
no,
very
of course.
intentionally. And another one, flowy linen dresses. And in why do we have to be one way to embody power?
That's a good question. Yeah.
Because somebody else said this is what power looks like? I think there is, like, and for women of all ages, like, such a remembrance of what our power is. And our power is in our intuition, in our voices, in our authenticity, in being honest, in being kind, in being fierce at time. Like, the woman has the power to create and to destroy. They're the same. And so I think, like, remembering that at its core, and then, as I said, I think what happens in outside is a side effect of it, of that.
I mean, I feel like also psychedelic journeys help you kind of, and I wonder, I'm sure you could talk to this too, like help you in general to elaborate on your own feminine and masculine elements. Where it might be before these journeys, you might sometimes have one that's too much in this direction and one that's too much in the other direction. And I feel like a lot of people, including myself, kind of have a much better understanding about their parts. I mean, if you even want to think of the internal family system parts. But even without that kind of therapy theory, it's just like I feel you are able to create a much bigger balance in yourself with these parts. So, I mean, how did you, I mean, did you connect to your power differently after journeys? I mean, you kind of started 10 years ago, maybe over a little 10 years ago. Was that something that came to you also as a topic in your journeys?
Yeah, as a struggle for a
Okay,
long time. As a struggle, I really did not want to. I was very afraid of power because I had seen what power over,
Yeah.
the consequences
Mm-hmm.
of that, of power over. And so I was really, really terrified. And then, of course, when you're in a role where you have you have power inherently to that role, you have to learn. Like, you just have to learn, and you make mistakes, and you know, we learn through contrast and through trial and error. And so a little bit here, a little bit there, you adjust. You learn through failure in many ways. So I feel like the relationship to power, to what it means,
Mm-hmm.
and to how it's expressed through me and in the world, is still something I'm learning about every day.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, if I may say this, like in the psychedelic space, I think like in pretty much every space there is kind of a higher percentage of men in leadership or in powerful positions.
Mm.
I mean, I think it's similar to many industries. I don't think it's that big of a difference. And is this something where you feel you needed to adjust to at some point, or is it like, do you think about strategies how to, how to stand your ground in a different way? Then you probably have to, I guess, right?
Yeah, and also in my case, I worked in finance for many years.
Oh wow, okay, yeah.
Management consulting, but I was
Okay.
covering capital markets and asset management. And then I worked in AI, two fields
Mm-hmm.
that are, I would say, 80, 90%
Yeah, for sure.
men. So I think I learned at a very young age that world, like how that world works. And I had to unlearn quite a bit for Journey Clinical, because what served me in those roles doesn't always serve me or the company. And so it's just been a fascinating journey. And I feel like this is one of those things that I'm still learning so much about. And what I also want to do is like, I don't want to create an opposition of like men and women. I think men are allies and can be so helpful and just help in a different way.
Absolutely.
So what I always try to do is like, while the styles may be different, how can I have their genius and their skill help move the company forward too?
And so, I mean, you were talking about you working in finance also. I mean, I feel sometimes there are two jobs that are really good to prepare you for everything. One is journalist and other is being in finance. So I'm always curious. I mean, I'm kind of fascinated by this world, probably also because of movies or anything. But how did you feel at that time? How did you perceive yourself as a person while being in finance?
I don't think there was so much room for that.
Okay, good. That's a good answer.
I think it was like deadline. You need to get things out. You need to get things done.
Okay.
You need to be at this client side on Monday. There was no room for how he felt about it.
Interesting also, huh? Like that you need to kind of eventually kind of create the ability also to feel something while you were in your work or what you're creating something.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it was more you need to think and you need to act fast. And you need to solve a lot of problems as quickly as you can.
Okay.
So feeling happened later. Like for me, like feeling in the workplace happened later. But at that time, it just wasn't the place. And I think when I said before, like I had to learn, when you don't have time to feel, when you don't have time to be inspired, and you're very much focused on execution, which was the case. I was also younger. My role was very much like, you need to go and execute. I think is very helpful. But when you're in a role of a co-founder specifically, you really need to be creative. You really need to tap into your imagination. You need to type into your vision. You need to type into potential, like what doesn't exist yet that I want to create in the world. And I think there are very different modes of being almost.
Interesting. Yeah. But I think also like right now, coming back to the psychedelic space, I mean, these companies who got the FDA voucher since the executive order, I mean, they're all big companies, biotech driven, but they're also kind of abstract in a way that people have no idea. I mean, they see, wow, it's a successful company, it has huge investment, so it is going to be taken seriously, so to say, even from people who are not in a psychedelic space. But isn't it also important, let's say, for somebody like you, which we kind of also started a conversation about, to, I'm not going to say become the face of something like that, but really kind of become like tangible as a person, creating a vessel or a company where people can actually, improve their lives or lose their depression. So do you think for you, is this important, not to be a celebrity, but to be recognized as the person creating this company?
Yeah, I think a few things. One, the drug dev or the pharma companies, they have a very different roles. Like their role is to bring the drugs to market. Companies like Journey Clinical is to be America's gateway to psychedelics.
Yeah.
That means for people, once these drugs are FDA approved, for people to actually access them and have treatment. So I think the role of a founder of a C or a CEO in those companies is quite different. Who you need to convince as a drug developer is the FDA.
Yeah.
So what you need is very tangible data. You need to be very scientific. When you're talking to, which is the case of Journey Clinical, both clinicians and patients and press more broadly and the market more broadly, you need to make this relatable for people. So I think because I'm in this care delivery space, there is much more of a need to speak to clinicians and to speak to patients and the market more broadly. And I think some things that I've learned over the years is I think it's very helpful to have me, I think, on the consumer side. On the clinician side, it's really helpful to have clinicians speak to clinicians because they share a language. Doctors trust other doctors. Psychotherapists trust other psychotherapists. So one thing that we've done at Journey Clinical is actually try to put different people forward depending on who we're speaking to and who's relatable. If you're a clinician, you have questions around how do I integrate that into my practice? And, what does my office need to look like? And what
it might look different then suddenly.
Exactly. And so when they hear from clinicians, it feels very trustworthy. And then for consumers, I think it's more important for me to be more of, as you say, like a face of like being able to talk about these more broadly.
So let's go something like 5 years forward. So you're sitting at Oprah, which you want to be. We're just putting it out there. So basically, I would be Oprah right now. So what would be the message you would like to really communicate if Journey has become, which I really like the idea, a consumer brand, kind of like, let's say like Peloton or something. So that kind of category. So what do you think is going to be the essence then? Because it must appear a little less medical eventually, but it also can't appear too kind of fluffy and like, oh, whatever, you can just try this and see what happens.
Yeah, I always say people talk about transformation, and while those are true, I always think about safety. How do we make people feel so safe? Because there's a lot of stigma. And how do we make people feel so safe that when they're having these dosing experiences followed by integration, they can truly access the material within themselves that is repressed or suppressed. And so I really believe, with our medical team and with licensed mental health professional, creating that container for safety so that people feel safe to go inward, touch the edges of their pain, right? Like this is how we help people, and then ultimately this is how we grow as a civilization. So if I like take it one level up, and every time we help one person, we help the collective.
So that means also in the end, like these smaller communities eventually, or bigger communities, depending on maybe what you want to achieve, but where people meet who have done this or like are in the process of finding out things. So, I mean, also in the context of AI, it seems to be that the actual coming together in a specific context or room is becoming extremely more important than it maybe was 5 years or back before the pandemic somehow. So, and it's also, you see that companies or even social media platforms start to, almost like LinkedIn, start to invest or pay money for creators to help them to arrange, in-person meetings with people. So, and how does this look for you in the context of psychedelics, besides like having events and just like education? Like, how should this exchange look like? So,
Mm.
do you know what I mean? Like,
Mhm. I think you've touched on two important things. One is with psychedelics, in an age of AI and everything is digital, the experience, the human experience, is the center of the entire treatment. It's not an afterthought. And so it is very much an experience based type of medicine. We, the therapist would listen to the content of what has emerged during the experience as the basis for psychotherapy. So I think that's one thing. It isn't, the experience is central to the treatment. And then the second thing that you said is, and I really believe that, and we have seen that at Journey Clinical too, is the aspect of community. And it is so much easier when you are in your community. Your therapist is in your community. They understand the specific challenges that you, with your unique story, have had to overcome. And what we see, and one of the reasons why at Journey Clinical we believe that empowering therapists was the way to go, is that they're already embedded in their local communities. They already have relationships in their local communities. And so this work happens through community and in community. Then you can talk about it. So I really believe that this is one of the ways that can help us, like, even like be involved locally, be more involved in your own existing community. And we see it, right, in group, people who do group therapy. It's unbelievable. They
you mean it
build,
works faster? It works more efficient in a way?
it works where you start to create bond and you start to be able to witness each other as we are. And what you realize is my pain is not so different from your pain. And then there's so much less pressure. It's like, okay, all right, we're both suffering from this. That's okay. And I'm not so bad. And so we see that through group therapy, the power of community. It allows for a different, like an added layer of healing with the group.
Interesting. Yeah, but I mean, obviously, there's also like almost like another layer coming in terms of, let's say, healing. Like there's GLP-1s coming. There's a different understanding of bodies coming. Maybe also, especially for women, that you kind of start to think about longevity in a different way. And then there's psychedelics. Do you think this is one big context in that sense? Or is the psychedelic, let's say, trauma healing experience something that is a little more sacred maybe than taking a GLP-1, to make it, let's very, kind of journalistically speaking, like a little more like, are these actual opposites? Or could they come together eventually and work together?
That's so interesting. I've never thought about that question. I also have never taken GLP-1, so I don't understand.
But I mean, in your context, I'm sure, like, because I realize a lot of people who are doing psychedelics or who are, let's say, developing a different feeling for their body after doing psychedelics, they take their body more seriously in a way. The health of the body is taken more seriously. Instead of just saying like, yeah, whatever, I just go to the gym eventually. Like I feel like there's a different understanding coming also for the whole system, for the whole car, so to say.
Yeah.
If you want to, like, just you start to understand yourself differently and what you eventually need also for yourself.
Right. And I think that's the most important. You start to listen.
Yeah.
Right? Because we're on override most of the time. And so you start to listen. What I've seen for women very often, of course, it's on a case-by-case basis, but first of all, you need rest. Like, if you listen to your body, the first thing that comes up is, I'm exhausted, I need rest.
Yeah.
That's the baseline.
That's the first step mainly
That-
for a lot of people, I feel.
I feel like it's
yeah.
often the first step is I need, and I don't even know what like rested feels like.
Yeah, exactly. Very important.
So that's one thing. I'm like
one of the therapists on the weekend, she said like, I cannot get enough of seeing women resting. I was like, whoa, okay, that is really a statement, kind of. But
yeah.
sorry, okay, the second.
No,
one?
like yes, like +1 to that.
Yeah.
Because I think that's the first thing that comes up is people are exhausted. They're on overdrive. They're busy, quote unquote. And so you've got to start with rest. I think second layer to that, like hydration. Like, are you drinking enough water?
No.
Are you keeping yourself hydrated? Right? That comes up. Then the questions around nutrition come up. Like, how do I actually nourish my body? And often we can be overfed but undernourished. What does nourishment means? What does eating enough means? And so there's so many questions around nourishment that come up. Women need nourishment. This is how our entire system works. So I think you know, and GLP-1 can be part of that inquiry. But I think what you're saying is it brings up all of these like questions around how do I live my life, and then of course movement. Like people start yoga or other kinds of somatic practices. Voice can come up. Like I started singing.
Oh, really? Oh, wow.
Right?
Okay.
Some people start painting because the need for expression, right? As humans, as like all of nature, not just humans, we have such a basic need to express who we are.
Yeah.
And so the ways through which we express are different for each one of us. And so I think that's another thing that we see come up. Careers, like people are like, I've been in this career. Is that the right career for me? So I think you see all of these questions, sometimes existential questions come up. What is life? What is the meaning of life? Why am I here? So I think everyone has a unique journey and everything on its own time. But those are themes that we see.
Yeah, and there's a lot of like, I think if people start to do this, there's a lot of questioning around their purpose suddenly. And also the connection, like, I mean, some therapists, I think, said that people who suffer severe depression often didn't have a purpose. Like they couldn't say what their purpose was. Like they had a job and they had a career, but they didn't feel a purpose. And so what do you think, like, in what context did you understand your purpose to do this? Because obviously this is your purpose. You're not going to be working for the car industry, like, by example, like the fashion industry tomorrow. So
you never know.
Okay, so to say, unless you become a consumer brand, and then there's the Journey Clinical Collection.
Exactly.
But I mean, but still, my feeling is towards you that you have a very strong purpose to bring this into the world. So is there something that, or a moment where you started to understand? Like, for example, after my first high-dose psilocybin journey, I was on a train, like 2 weeks after, to meet Dr. Bronner's to ask them about the sponsorship. It was completely, I've never done anything like that. And then suddenly in that train, I realized, okay, this is now my purpose, to really find a strategy, aka sponsors, a podcast, to bring this outside of a certain bubble, maybe also. And since then, like you said earlier, there were a lot of difficult times in this industry, and the winter, and yeah, it's not going to happen. Like all of these problems that arise to working in this industry, but still, it gave me some. Okay, just the way it's going to look might change, but the purpose as such is that purpose. So, is there something where you would say, well, there was a moment or an encounter with somebody?
maybe there are two things. One is I remember so vividly when I was sitting on the trading floor.
Oh, really? Oh, wow. Okay.
I sat on the trading floor
Yeah.
for about 4 years. And, you know, I would have access to all of the clients' data, of course. And I would help companies actually become richer
Mm-hmm.
than what they already were. And internally, I was like, I wake up and I work really hard. Like I work,
I'm sure you
12,
did. Yeah.
12 hours a day, 13, 14 hours a day. Like that was baseline. And I'm spending all of this life force and life energy and vitality and intelligence into making really successful companies even more successful. And something internally, I was like, why am I doing that?
Mm-hmm.
So that was like an inquiry that I had for a long time. And then what felt very natural with Journey was, okay, the good thing is I have all these skills. Like
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah, you
have
do.
all
Yeah.
these skills. They're very useful. And so the way Journey came about was we have all these skills that are very useful in the real world and very useful in making things move forward. And how can we apply that to something that is near and dear to my heart? And I remember I used to call it in the early days, I was like, this is a heart project. um, and of course, then, it shifts and it changes and it evolves.
Mm-hmm.
And I think purpose also maybe evolves with
Mm-hmm.
ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and in what I think I always feel very passionate about is I think psychedelics are really powerful tools to help people remember themselves. Like, I really believe in people so much, and I believe in our incredible potential. Like, every time I see someone, I'm like, wow, like, people are amazing. And then, I also equally see how much we get in the way of ourselves, and myself included. And I'm like, wow, like we're such incredible, powerful creatures. And then we have all these ways in which we resist
Mm-hmm.
reality and we get in our own ways. And then like it's a mess and you have to go and clean it up. And so I feel really passionate about helping people remember themselves and how amazing they are.
Sounds like you're a really good CEO. But so if you have your purpose, which you have kind of, I think at one point you also you realize, okay, I need to become constantly bolder to do this.
Mm.
I need to piss some people off eventually if I follow my purpose. I need to eventually lose friends sometimes, to be honest,
Mm-hmm.
within the combination of psychedelics and purpose finding. So how do you, let's say, I'm sure you had moments where you had these insights already in the last couple of maybe months where you see, oh, nowadays I can't be nice Myriam anymore, so to say. Or like here I need to be nicer Myriam, but it's kind of like an adjustment. But I'm interested in a part where the not nice Myriam, which you have to be at one point with some things. Like how do you talk to yourself about this necessity at one point?
Yeah, thank you. This is such an important topic and one that is not easy, I will
No,
say.
of course. I mean, but I think it's really important to also say this, that this is,
Mhm.
it will require other things from you eventually.
Yeah, and I think so. I had this tendency of being very much a people pleaser. I wanted to build consensus and I wanted
Mm.
everyone to be in some form of harmony. Like,
Mm.
then I realized, well, that doesn't get you anywhere. And I had to become comfortable, and it was very painful to be like sometimes the villain in someone's story and
Interesting, yeah.
to piss people off and to love myself anyways through that. And I think there was a nuance that I learned, I'm still learning, is when you like being nice is like not so useful to anyone, including myself and including the other person. That means I'm sugarcoating something.
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't that person be so much better off if I could just be direct? And I know it can get uncomfortable, but it's okay. So I think like I'm still developing the capacity to sit with discomfort, to live with discomfort, both when I receive it and when I give it, right? Because it goes both ways. And to know that it's actually love. That if somebody truly loves you, they will give you sometimes the harsh truth. And so my relationship to nice
Mm-hmm.
has changed entirely.
I love that you do this.
Yeah, because it's not needed.
No. Mm.
What's needed is to tell the truth the way you see it at that moment. And of course, the truth changes, right, moment to moment. But if you really love someone and if they truly love you, telling you the truth is the single most helpful thing that can help you on your path and can help them on their path. And that has been like understanding that this is actually love has been like a shift in perspective.
Yeah, also, thank you for sharing this. But I find it also interesting that often in this psychedelic world, it is often this notion around, oh, everybody needs to be kind, and this kindness and understanding and what is the word, compassion. So of course we know moments where this is absolutely necessary, but I find it, especially in the beginning, I found it very confusing sometimes. Like that some people or like some contexts would require or would ask from you to be compassionate, or like being open-minded to such and such, whatever it is, like where it felt wrong, but people wouldn't admit it because, oh no, now with doing psychedelics, I need to be so compassionate. So I think also a job for the next years is going to be to tolerate more uncomfortable feelings around the psychedelic, I don't know, field, industry, but also in your own journey. I think the interesting thing is to be more and more able to tolerate unpopular or unpleasant insights that you have also for yourself, kind of.
That's the path of growth.
Yeah.
I believe, you know, when you're cuddled in your pain, it serves. Like it serves, it's helpful because you can feel seen, heard, understood. And that in itself is healing. I think and sometimes you also need to shake things up. And I think I feel very grateful that being in the business of psychedelics, I really have to integrate these two parts of myself. Like in the business, sometimes you need to be aggressive and impatient, which are not qualities that are valued in the therapeutic framework. And I think right at the end of the day, we're humans. Humans are not just light and love. We are. And we're so much more than that. And I think the way we can embody the truth is accepting that sometimes we're grateful and sometimes we're enraged. And sometimes we're really sad and really joyful. And I think it's the fullness of the human experience that makes us humans. If you look at animals, I have a dog. He's amazing. When you see him, he's like the sweetest thing. And then there's another big dog, and he loses it.
Yeah.
He's like, rah! And, and it's such a good example because it is what we are. And I think that forgetting or selecting a piece of what we wish we were doesn't help anyone. What we need to do is, what you were talking before with IFS, like integrates all these parts of ourselves. And the more we can lean into discomfort and the more we can sit with it and not run away from it, sit with our fears. I spend so much time sitting with my fears.
In journeys, you mean?
In journey,
outside.
in general, sit with the fears. Because if you don't, you'll end up making decision out of fear that you don't even realize. So get really clear on your fears and your dark parts in all of you, and be kind and compassionate to all of you, all of us. Somebody was recently saying psychedelics have been used for light and love. They've also been used for war.
Exactly, yeah.
And
To become a fighter, like before you go into.
to have the vision
Right.
of the jaguar, right? Like
Mhm.
to tap into more primal parts of yourself. And so that's why I always say psychedelics are amplifier. They
Mhm.
amplify all of us, but they're neutral. So it's our job as
Mhm.
humans to
Mhm.
remember all of us and not just what we like.
And I just want to quickly come back to the patients. So I guess you have also conversations with them, some of them. Like, how do they talk about their lives that have been changed? Like, is there a certain pattern you recognize, or like, probably they're all very grateful that they, kind of could figure things out. But so, is there something I almost want to say significant to these times that we're in that are very confusing and in very interesting times, but also challenging at the same time? Is there something that patients tell you that help them to lead a better life, also in that sense, with psychedelics?
I mean, I've heard thousands, or
Mm.
thousands of stories, testimonial experiences. I think at the end, people tend to come back to love. Um, in what I think what's really important, you hear the stories. I got my life back. Like you hear these stories where real people's lives were changed and transformed for the better. And what you also hear when the therapists talk about it is it happens over a period of time, right? They do the preparation with the therapist, they have a dosing session,
Mm-hmm.
they work through integration, then they have another dosing session, and more comes up and more comes up. And so people people remember their humanity, and they remember to love themselves, to be kind to themselves, to be compassionate, to be patient. Um, and of course, you have sometimes the like traumatic stories of war and brain injury and childhood abuse and childhood trauma. And when you have these really heavy and acute cases, I think what's really beautiful is that you see that this can actually help, where otherwise people would not necessarily have options. And what we see at Journey Clinical is we'll always say 87% of patient report improvement in clinical outcomes. But I think what's even more powerful is 40% show full remission.
Wow. Okay.
And those are often treatment resistant
Mm-hmm.
to prior um, either psychotherapy or to prior medications or to prior like other types of treatments.
And I mean, let's quickly talk a little bit about ketamine also, because that's the compound you started with, and
Mm-hmm.
there will be more. But so, and I mean, it has obviously such a big appearance now in many ways, like in a nightlife context, in a recreational context. But in a therapeutical context, it seems to be sometimes, I want to say, a little bit underrated, um, in the sense that it can be, you can have a mystical experience. You can have very visual experiences. I mean, maybe not always, or depending on how you administer it. So, but how do you feel about ketamine? Is it a psychedelic to you, or is it, some people say it's not a psychedelic because it's not a tryptamine experience, but it is something very interesting. I almost feel like you can't really say what it is in the end.
Yeah, and there is this debate: is it a
Yeah,
psychedelic? Is it not
yeah,
a psychedelic? Is it a
yeah.
dissociative anesthetic? I think what is interesting And what I've heard the therapists say many times is because it depends on doses, but the psychedelic experience isn't necessarily so like hot or
Mm-hmm.
strong like you may have with other
Yeah.
psychedelics. It has this dissociative part to it. And so, and then it's not that long, right? It's like a 2 to 3 hour all in dosing. And so, in the peak experience, you have about 15, 20 minutes. You have a peak experience. It's like, 30 to 45 minutes. And then there is the reentry into your body and the integration. And so, I would say it's actually quite a good entry point into psychedelics.
Mm-hmm.
If you're
Mm-hmm.
with a therapist, it's, it's manageable. The time is manageable. You can fit it into your life, right? You don't have to block 8 hours, go to a place.
No.
Like
Yeah.
this is
Mm-hmm.
possible with your daily life. You can have very strong experiences, but not always. And so it's a little bit of a like introduction to psychedelics more broadly.
And so there are three ways to basically administer, right? Like a lozenge, like a IV situation, and intramuscular. I'm doing this because it comes here. Like, could you talk to these administrations of ketamine? Because I think they have also different,
Bioavailability.
yeah, that, and also they work differently in your brain, maybe also, right, or in your body, at least.
Yeah, and maybe I can talk about um, what's accessible today in
Yeah.
America
Mm-hmm.
because that's what people can
Mm-hmm.
relate to. So, and we hear those questions all the time. People ask, they often say, "Okay, I've tried traditional routes, it's not working. I'm now considering alternative routes. What can I do?" Like this is what I
Mm-hmm.
hear from
Mm-hmm.
people, and then um, they come up and they see often ketamine and TMS as like two treatment options. And then when they start to hear about ketamine, they get really confused. They were like, hold on, do I go to an IV clinic? Do I sign up for one of the at home ketamine
Mm-hmm.
programs? Do I do ketamine assisted psychotherapy with a therapist? Or do I do Spravato, which is a
Mm-hmm.
nasal spray and has been FDA approved for treatment resistant depression in 2019, I believe. And so consumers tend to come up against that, and that gets really confusing.
Yeah.
And so at Journey Clinical, we try to do some education around that. And what we offer is ketamine assisted psychotherapy as well as Spravato. And what's very beautiful with Spravato is if you meet the eligibility criteria, this is fully covered by insurance, meaning like a $10 or $30 copay.
Mm-hmm.
So that makes it accessible for people. And then ketamine assisted psychotherapy is often actually with a lozenge and in the context of psychotherapy. So that allows you to go deeper with yourself. And then you have IV clinics. They tend to have more of a medical or biological model, meaning they rely on the effects of the ketamine itself, and they don't do the psychotherapy with it. Similarly, at home ketamine lozenges program do the same. So I think there is like a core philosophy difference around do we include the psychotherapy or not? Is this a biological model only, or is it an integrated biological and psychological model? And then insurance coverage also, because IV clinics and at-home programs are typically not covered by insurance versus ketamine-assisted psychotherapy. You can have the medical and psychotherapy consultations covered by insurance, and
Mm-hmm.
Spravato is fully covered. And then there is this element of set and setting as well, which in ketamine assisted psychotherapy is so important. And in medical models is not, they don't necessarily consider it variable of treatment. And of course, there's a lot of nuance, and each clinic has its own approach. So the statements that I'm making are pretty broad, but it's mostly to help people understand what's available today in the market.
But I mean, you just mentioned it that in the medical context, sometimes you walk into a hospital room then and get it administered, and it's kind of like it could be a strange feeling, so to say, because it also is connected, I think, to being sick or being not well. And then if you think about it, how it's done in a more therapeutical context, we were just in this really nice room, and there are like poems read before you take the lozenge.
Yes, they are.
It was
There
quite
is.
interesting how this was like somebody's leading you very softly into this experience, kind of. So, and I think it must be such a different outcome also. Having said that, of course, the majority of people will probably only have the chance to do this in a medical context. So do you think this medical, I don't know, aesthetics or visuals will also change eventually?
I mean, I hope so. For us at Journey Clinical, we literally, and it's public, we have a blog, how to set up your space for ketamine-assisted psychotherapy.
And how do you?
So what you really want is create a sense of warmth and a sense of safety. So a little bit like this space that we're in, right? You see there plants.
Plants is good. Okay.
Plants
Wood,
feels good.
something woody kind
Woody feels good. Of course, you typically have a couch where you can lay on. You have a blanket. Sometimes you can get a little bit cold, so you want to make sure you have that. The lighting needs to be able to be dimmed so that it's not so intense for your eyes. Music is such an important component of set and setting. The relationship with your therapist, with the person who's in the room. Do you feel safe with them? Do you feel that you've built trust? That's why we always talk about the therapeutic alliance and the therapeutic container, because that is such it's a clinical variable. Really, it is at the end of the day. And so set and setting is so important. There is research about that. Such an important variable in the treatment outcomes.
And what about talking in the therapy? Like things come up and you kind of feel, so because I think sometimes the people are just going somewhere, so to say, and are with themselves, but there's also the possibility that you want to share something with the therapist and where you talk around the experience.
It depends on the dosing. So if you have a psychedelic experience, it is an inward experience. So you typically don't really speak during the experience unless you need to go to the restroom for practical considerations. But so psychedelic experiences are inward experiences. You speak with the therapist before and you speak with the therapist after, and the therapist is here. If you're feeling really anxious, maybe they'll say one word or two words and say, I'm here, and then you might be able to relax. So during psychedelic dosing, it's an inward experience. If you do psycholytic dosing, it is more of a kind of, as you say, a conversation. And I think the way that new psychedelics will be rolled out are mostly psychedelic experiences. So these are going to be inward experiences with, people to keep you safe and to be present if you're feeling a little anxious.
So, let's say somebody comes to the platform, to your website, and is really looking for a therapist at Journey Clinical. And there are many kinds of therapists, many variations. So how does this work? How do you engage with the offering, so to say?
So you come to our website,
Mm-hmm.
journeyclinical.com, and we have a public directory that really anyone can access. And typically, what you would enter is your location. So, for example, your zip code, um, anything that you're looking for, if it's anxiety, depression, or grief, and then your insurance, which insurance you have.
Mm-hmm.
And when you enter those criteria, then we would give you a short list of therapists that meet your criteria. What we typically recommend is to have a consultation with them.
Mm-hmm.
Most therapists offer a free 15 minutes, 20-minute consultation to see if there is fit. It really needs to go both ways. The therapist and the patient have to feel like this is a good match so that they can engage. And then once you have found the therapist, then very important next step is that you have an appointment with our medical team where you're cleared for treatment. So that means you go through your medical history, your psychiatric history, your family history, and there are some contraindications that exist. So we want to keep you safe.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have a full intake consultation with a medical doctor that if you're eligible, then you will receive the ketamine in your home. And typically, what you will do is you will take the ketamine to your therapist office and follow this protocol of preparation, dosing, and integration, and have the dosing session at the therapist's office.
Oh, it seems like a very safe container. Like there's not a lot of option for a woo-woo situation, so to say.
No, we want to keep you safe.
Okay.
That's the most important. This is how you can deepen your work with
Mm-hmm.
yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And psychedelics are powerful. So we need to make sure that the medical aspect of the treatment is clear and that you are in a good container with your psychotherapist.
I still feel there's always some kind of rest of kind of weight that you can't control, kind of. And you might have a really strong experience. Like, I mean, I personally had that too. Like, after 30 years, I remembered something that was really painful, but at the same time, it was the gateway to the actual healing situation. So, and I sometimes feel like after you have these journeys, even with therapists, it's almost when the time comes when you really need to look into what happened to you and you start to understand what kind of life decisions this had made you that were not maybe in your favor even. Like, so how does this look? I think that's what a lot of people are also interested in. Like, how does it look afterwards once you have found the, let's say, reason for something, or like for your depression, for your trauma, for, you know what I mean? It is kind of like that. That's when it starts, and
Yeah.
it can take a while also until you really started to understand what impact it had on you.
Yeah, of course. And I think that's why we always recommend to do a full treatment course.
Mm-hmm.
So we have 6 to 8 dosing session protocol for exactly that reason. The core insights might not come up at the very beginning
Mm-hmm.
when you're trying to find your footing with these altered states. You're trying to understand what it is. And I think also, when people have expectations, then they're disappointed. So you have to work through all of that first. Like people have expectations, and then, as you say, it doesn't happen the
Eventually
way
not, yeah. Mm-hmm.
you think.
Mm-hmm.
And I would argue that this is true in life too. We think we're in control. We're not in control. And so
No,
the
not really.
insights come up as they come up. And so much of the work that the therapist does is helping the clients understand how to be present. But the intention ends up being presence and kindness for what emerges. And then, as you say, working through what emerges. But it might take a little bit of time.
Something else? I have one. Yeah, because I have one question. Maybe also it's good for the ending. Like, so this whole, development, especially here in America, like also in context of the executive order, like it will create. It looks like it will create a really big push for this for several compounds. Also, ibogaine is one of the most preferred, especially for veterans treatments. So let's say, how's your vision also with your own company? Once, let's say, you already had become a consumer brand, like, how should this be implemented in the sense of in a society? I mean, there's a very factual, like, this is how it can look into a medical context, this is how to do the therapies, but there must be also an opening to these questions, how psychedelics will change in general lives. I mean, AI changes lives, but psychedelics also changes lives. So where do you think this sits in our society right now, this kind of fast track feeling that we all have around this? Is there a need, or like we need to adjust to a new world also, in a sense?
I think we always are adjusting to a
Mm-hmm.
new world.
Mm-hmm.
And throughout time, there's been so many different inventions and progress, whether it's in medicine or in other domains. And so, interestingly enough, in this time, both psychedelics and AI have this
Yeah, it's
rapid
interesting.
acting, like there is an acceleration.
Mm-hmm.
In what used to take us 20 years, today is like 6 months. So I think we need to learn how to live with that, and I think it's one of many things that simply needs to get into the conversation, where people need to know about it first, need to understand it, understand when it helps and when it doesn't help. And I always say, I see so many times either the demonization of psychedelics
Mm-hmm.
or the psychedelics are a magic pill. And
Yeah.
I think both of those narratives are not true.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think we like very much have a
Yeah.
responsibility
Mm-hmm.
to bring the conversation in the middle and to talk about, like, when is this safe, when this isn't a good fit, how it helps, the limitations also that it has. And so I think it's just like when we integrate anything new in society, we have to go through kind of the growing pains. You know, there is like the toddler, and then the toddler grows up, and there's the teenager. The teenager is angry, and then there is the adult. So I think there is like
Then
something
the adult is becoming a teenager again when you're 40.
that's
So just saying.
that's true. That's a good point.
So it's there are many stages that we have to
So many
work through.
stages,
Kinda.
right? So I think we need to go and accept the stages as an industry in
True.
what it brings to the
Yeah.
world, through the ebbs and flows of it all.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you for being so open also with all of this, because I think it's very powerful for people to understand why this is so powerful, and not just like, okay, yeah, it's for people with depression, because it has affects so many other kind of parts of our lives than just mental health, and in that sense, I think. And that's also something I find important to talk about, that it doesn't have to be only in connection to depression. It can be also a life questioning, or like in general questioning yourself around things. So, which is something very positive, kind of, in a way. So I think it's also great to to don't separate these things anymore so much, because I think if you have the opportunity to look into your life or yourself, then you probably won't be so depressed, because you find maybe earlier on than we are doing this now, kind of answers to questions, or you go in a different direction. So it's kind of a very good tool that we're talking about here. I just wanted to say. But thank you so much. It
Thank
was
you.
really interesting.
Thank you for having me.
Sure.
Very grateful.